Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Time of the Writer 2021, presented to you by the Center of Creative Arts at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. My name is Pumelela Nqelenga, and I will be the moderator for this afternoon's lunchtime session. Our topic for Namhlanje is navigating the publishing space, opportunities for aspiring writers. Before I introduce our amazing panel, I would like to acknowledge our partners and funders, the University of KwaZulu-Natal, the National Department of Arts and Culture, KZN Department of Arts and Culture, French Institute of South Africa, STAND Foundation, Foundation for Human Rights, National Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences. Also, I'd like to acknowledge our media partner, Imbiza, Journal for African Writing, as well as our technical partner, Hear My Voice. Siyabulela for your assistance. For those at home, you are welcome to participate with us via our social media platforms, the live chats, the Q&A sections and comment section. You can also send us questions or comments via these platforms. I'm very privileged to be in the company of South African writers and publishers and look forward to their insights on navigating the publishing industry. So I'd like to go on and move into our panelists. Today we have isiZulu language specialist author Celimpilo Dladla. She holds a master's in isiZulu from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. She's currently a PhD candidate at Wits University. She has published numerous books, including Usekunduleni Kwengqondo Yam, The Pastor with a Criminal Mind, and Gumhlabakelo. Through her books, she draws readers' attention to injustices that people shy to talk about, such as abuse and ethical behaviors of respected members of society. She lives by the following motto: never underestimate the power of words. Siyabonga kakhulu sisi for joining us today.
Ngiyabonga kakhulu.
All right. Our next panelist is Kwanele Sifunda, who is 24 years old and a writer from KwaZulu-Natal. He has published his first poetry anthology in October 2020, titled Love and Lies. Sifunda speaks on a whole host of subjects, but the underlying theme is always an emotional expression. He is currently studying at CPUT and plans to pursue a master's in creative writing. Again, siyabulela kakhulu nawe Kwanele for joining us namhlanje.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
Sure. Last but absolutely not least, our final panelist, Themba Mabaso, who is the co-owner of Njabulo Publishers, which has been in operation since 2007. Mr. Mabaso is a renowned writer and illustrator of children's books. He has written more than 48 books and illustrated 15 books, of which half are self-published. These are mainly readers, some of which have been translated into other South African official languages. Mr. Mabaso holds a BA degree at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and has further qualifications in human resources management. We are excited to have you today, namhlanje, Mabaso. Inkosi kakhulu.
Ngiyabonga kakhulu banani, inkosi.
Sure. As I announced earlier on, our topic today is navigating the publishing space, opportunities for aspiring writers. I'm keen to hand over to our panelists to give us insights and deeper understanding of the complexities of this industry and its potential in growth in South Africa. And on that regard, can I please start with you, Themba Mabaso? On your own experiences as a publisher, what is the landscape looking like namhlanje in South Africa? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, if you talk about publishing, I think there is a growing trend of new publishing entities that are coming up. And if you go to the main bookshop that we've got, those that are distributed throughout the country, there are sections that are growing up now, a section where you could see South African writing happening there. You see new books coming up. They are what we usually call traditional publishers. They are there and doing a lot of work. But what is very interesting is that there are new publishing entities that are cropping up. Some are self-published and some are small publishing entities. But after all, they are really adding a very good kaleidoscope of the South African literature. And they are really bringing different genres to the fore. And also I can see that there is a growing number of readers that are also coming to the fore based on the fact that there's a lot of offering. And I think the future is bright as long as there's going to be support from both the distributors and also the readers. And therefore, this is what the landscape look like for now.
Thank you so much. The growth, I think, is so crucial, and the diversity as well, as you speak, seems to be something that is quite needed within the industry. Sis Celimpilo, Dladla, can you, I don't know, share with us your own experiencing of publishing books right now, and how that how that pursuit has gone for you?
Okay, so with the traditional and the self-publishing ways of publishing our books, so I decided to go for self-publishing. All my books are self-published. Not that there's anything wrong with traditional publishing, but I just found it easier to go with the self-publishing route. And I also found out that there are lots of new writers who have come on board, as well as lots of forums where writing is being discussed, like even Facebook groups where there are writers that are focusing on even writing on indigenous languages. So I find myself there as a language specialist who fits in very well, where I can choose to write in the languages that I know. There's also help from the publishers that are out there, like Via Africa. They have programs where they assist aspiring writers. I was fortunate enough to also benefit from that program with my drama book that I wrote, Yami, which was published by Africa through Smashwords, which is an online platform where they published it as an ebook. So as writers, we are now able to learn about publishing via online platforms as well as publishing via the normal printed means. So there are quite a lot of opportunities out there that we still need to tap on, like publishing audiobooks as well. That's something that is out there and very interesting, because listening to an audiobook is another world on its own, and I quite enjoy listening to audiobooks. So I think that if we as writers of African books can also tap into that and get our books converted to audiobooks, that could also take us further as African writers. So there are quite a lot of opportunities out there, and a lot of people are aspiring to be writers. We also find that the Arts and Culture, KZN, Department of Arts and Culture, is also coming on board with the writing competitions that help writers to get published if they do win those competitions, as well as the promotion of reading and writing clubs in municipalities. So there is quite a lot out there for writers to tap on.
Thank you. I mean, you've given such a beautiful overview of what's going on specifically in KZN and what's happening now in this contemporary setting. Kwanele, where are you now with your first publishing, and how has that experience gone for you?
So for me, it was a bit up and down. I sat on this anthology of poetry for maybe over 2-3 years. I looked into the self-publishing space and it wasn't viable for me at the time. And then I got lucky enough to get published by Praise Publishers last year, which is a small entity from Durban. And it started off well, but I always knew what I wanted for my book. I knew exactly what my cover was supposed to look like, how many pages that I wanted to have and stuff like that, how many poems I wanted in the book. But then talking to the publishers and having a clash, if I want to call it a clash, but maybe a discussion, and what they saw their vision for my book was. So going into traditional publishing as a person, you should be ready for that conversation. You might know exactly what you want to do with your book, but they are also spearheading your book, the growth, where you need to go, or where they think the industry is going with this book, and how they think you fit into that. So for anyone who wants to get into traditional publishing or being offered something like that, be sure that you're going to be able to negotiate what you want and what you cannot have, and be ready for that space. But it was a beautiful process. was a lot of growing and a lot of growth that I from further on, if I get published again, or if I choose to go to self-publishing, I know how to navigate this space now a lot better. And I would encourage anyone to just write and get into, I sat on my book for 2 years, as I said. So don't rush into things because it's happening now and, you know, and you need to get it out there. Sit on it if you have to, learn how the space works, research, and find the best publisher for you, be it self-publishing or be it traditional. So for me, poetry has started properly for me where I recognize poetry in terms of different types of poetry, because we've had our Shakespeare's, we've had our Edgar Allan Poes and stuff like that. Rupi Kaur was probably my biggest inspiration. She writes very short, emotional poetry. It's very to the point. It's maybe 5 lines and it's very intense. You know, it has a bit of illustration. So it hits a bigger, wider demographic, which is what I want to do as well. And hopefully I'm going to do a lot more of it into the future. But yeah, it was a very beautiful experience and a tough one at the same time.
No, I can imagine that it must have had its own complexities as well. You talk about negotiating, you're talking about patience as well in a time where people are trying to get things done now. And I'm looking at you, Themba, knowing that you've been publishing since 2007. How did you how have you been keeping this up for this long? And what shifts and changes have you gone through and challenges that you've gone through when it comes to being a publisher here in South Africa?
That's a very good question. For me, being a self-publisher came as a means of trying to satisfy a certain need. It comes out of necessity. When I grew up, I was lucky enough to grow in a place where there was a library. In the early 70s, I remember getting into the library for the first time, seeing a lot of books. I was very excited, went to the children's section. A lot of them were in English, of course, and there were some scatterings of Afrikaans. I will read a lot of those books, but I made a promise to say, I'm going to write a book when I'm old. That's what I said. And I'll write them also in isiZulu, which is my home language. But it took me some time, and I went up to the university because at one stage I thought that maybe I need to have a university degree before I can write. But the stories were keeping on coming up. And I was studying at University of KwaZulu-Natal in Pietermaritzburg. And I remember on my second year, I was boarding a taxi. It was fully packed. And the story just jumped into my head about the greediness of the taxi drivers at the time. Therefore, there was a character I composed, which I called Gimba. And then the first book I did was Gimba the Greedy Taxi. I wrote it while I was doing my second year. But it took some time for it to be published because trying to get publishing, especially if you are going to be an illustrator, because I did fine art and majoring in paintings and drawing, and therefore I could translate my university skills and my training into doing illustrations. But I knocked in a number of doors, and a lot of publishers, traditional publishers, it's difficult to bring a story for children's book if you are unknown, and also you want to write in isiZulu during that time I'm talking about in the 80s, and you also insist on using your own illustrations. That book was only published in 1995 because I kept it with me up until when I was working. I was in Johannesburg. Then I approached a certain publisher and explained myself, which was called Sasabona. And the gentleman who was running it could see my passion, and he understood because that book was in a series. It was not going to be a once-off books. It was going to be a series of the same character in different scenarios. Therefore, the book was published in 1995. And it was my second book because the first book that I published was a youth novel, which I was lucky enough to go through that. The book was selling, but not very much. Therefore, the publisher tried to push it, and they keep on telling me that there are no readers of Zulu. But I was sure that the book was a good book. Therefore, it needed a chance. At a certain stage, I realized that I need to take my rights for that books from them. But that was after I went for a trip under a project that was called Shuttle 99, which was spearheaded by government. They took 5 writers from South Africa. They sent them to the Nordic countries. We went to Norway, Iceland, and Denmark. That's where we met with those writers. The first stop was in Iceland. Population at that time was about 480 something thousand people in it. And then we met the writers for children. And those writers were full-time writers. They will ask us, say, why are you not full-time writers when you've got a population of 54 million? That question stuck into my mind about the issue of the reading culture that we need to instill. Therefore, when I came back to South Africa, I went to the publisher and said, I need to get my right back so that I can publish the book on my own because I had a marketing strategy with me. He took some time up until they gave me my right. In 2007, when I started self-publishing, I republished the book. And at the end of 2007, I already sold about 15,000 of those books because I translated one into isiZulu, another one in English. The combination of the two sold. That for me was a sign to say there is future for books in isiZulu, and there is a future for South African writers and illustrators of children's book, as long as you also market your book right. From then, I done a number of books in children's book. I'm illustrating them, and I always do my market research. I go to the shop to find out what is out there. I read books. I also meet people. At one stage, I used to visit schools just to, when they call for there is usually a time for them where they call writers to come in and talk about their books. And that is also stimulating people to buy books. And this is how I've sustained myself from this point. But one of the biggest challenge that you can have a book and very good quality, the crux is you also need to have a distribution strategy. And there are a lot of distributors in South Africa, but it comes at a cost, and also some of them is very difficult to penetrate that market. And also the shops, you always have to negotiate yourself. Therefore, in most cases, I've been utilizing the independent bookshops because the owners, you can talk to them and explain yourself. They always are willing to take a risk and stock the book, but it needs a lot of administration. What has sustained me as a self-publishing entity is innovation. You always have to be innovative. I've studied my market. I know that there are a lot of gaps within the children's book market in South Africa, especially in our indigenous languages. For example, we grew up reciting Imilolozelo nursery rhyme. But have you seen a book in your local language, in your indigenous language, in nursery rhyme? I'm talking about book with illustrations. No, you don't see. You go to the shops, you find a number of books, the Mother Goose books. There are different types. The same nursery rhyme will be published by different publishers and different illustrators. And to that fact, I started now to say, let me do one for isiZulu. I did the research. I wrote the book, I illustrated it. And that book was also a hit because it became one of the rare books that you'll find out there. And a lot of us are now living in suburbs. Our children are studying in English. They come back reciting English nursery rhymes. And if it also hit you as a Black person, say, what about our heritage? Because we are losing it. And therefore, we've done that in order to try to preserve our heritage in terms of oral literature. Secondly, to add value by putting illustrations, because it's become easier for a young reader to read and rhyme and also relate to the pictures. That combination is really very, very powerful and effective. And therefore, to answer your question, to say how I've made it since 2007 up to now, is because of the innovation that we are doing with Jabulo Publishers, to try to look at the gaps, to address those gaps, to look at the genres that are there. For example, just to give one last genre that we are lacking of, especially in isiZulu, but I'm sure in other indigenous languages. The science fiction. Have you seen a novel in science fiction in isiZulu? Maybe if not. I've written one, it's gone there. It was quite a challenge to do it, but if I remember the experience, to be creative, to write from nowhere, because you have to also look at inventing certain words or translating them. They talk about the laser. What is the laser in isiZulu? The galaxies. You have to talk about those things. Therefore, it was a very exciting journey for me, but the products, I'm proud of it, and it has been well received by the people because of the innovation and to try to address the need within the reading market in South Africa, especially in our indigenous languages. I think I'll stop there. I'll continue with other probing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Themba Mabaso. I think your insights and your experience is so rich, and it's so wonderful to have this platform to hear all of that, and also to be aware and made aware of these books that are available, but yet we are not seeing them in shelves or necessarily seeing them out in social media platforms. And just to sort of feed into that, we've got a question from a YouTube subscriber, Usamkelo Dladla. And any of you can answer these questions, by the way. And they're asking, are there apps to use for ebooks specifically for the African continent to enable a much broader audience rather than using social media marketing? Celimpilo, is there any way you can speak back to that comment or question?
Okay. As far as I know with Smashwords that you are able to publish, and then people can access those books via EPUB, Kindle, and various platforms that sell ebooks. So you can actually go online, search for the book you want, then it can pop up. I know with my books, The Past of the Criminal Mind, as well as Usebujuni Ngqondo Yami, I'm able to access them. If I just write the title on Google search, it's going to pop up in various ebook shops. So you can access them. As long as you're able to search for that book that you're looking for, it can pop up on the platforms. But with regards to African languages, with my experience, there aren't many books out there in our languages or on the ebooks platforms. But then it's possible to do so. Like I mentioned earlier, that Via Africa is assisting writers to get their books out there as ebooks rather than printed books. So there is an opportunity for us as African writers to get our books out there, because with ebooks, they seem to be the future, because accessing ebooks is much easier than going to a shop to purchase a printed book, because you can simply buy via any app like Google. You can go to Google Books, then you can just purchase your book there, and within a few seconds you are able to read. I also know that with shops, with publishers like Shutter and Shooter, they do have those platforms as well. I have purchased some books there as well. So they give you an option to choose whether you're buying the printed or the ebook. So there are opportunities out there for us as writers of African languages.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I suppose, I mean, we are dealing with in an interesting age now, a contemporary age where you're competing with social media, you're competing with other distractions out there, and access to books and fashioning books is not an easy thing. I don't know, what are your thoughts around the fact of, I suppose, literacy in South Africa, access to books in South Africa, and how we can shift the dynamic of going back to ufunda, going back to reading. You've got Netflix, you've got YouTube, you've got all these other things that people are interested in. Why are we going back to reading? What can we do to enforce this attitude, hopefully, in the future? I don't know if Celimpilo, you can answer to that as well.
Okay. What I like most about reading is that instead of seeing a character there performing the action, you are able to craft the character in your head. So you are able to imagine the character based on the descriptions that you find in the book. So reading, as compared to watching TV, the difference is that you are able to be part of the story yourself. So if we can teach people that when you read, it's not just a matter of counting the words in the book, but you are being part of the story yourself. You immerse yourself in the story, and you are able to see yourself in the story as well. There is more to reading, and also you get to learn words, even the basics of it at school, that you learn words, you learn how to write, you learn proper spelling, and you learn how to phrase yourself when you are talking or writing. So there is more to reading than just watching on TV. Also with reading, there are different genres. So there is more out there for you. Like who Themba mentioned earlier about science fiction in the science fiction gap in isiZulu or in African languages. I also did a search last year for science fiction. I was interested in science fiction in isiZulu, and I came across one book by Mackenzie, which I found quite interesting. It was One, So in my mind, I thought there was only one book out there until now, but I've learned that Themba as well has a science fiction book out there. And when I read that book, it was about aliens, and it was based on the what do you call this, out there in the space, and it was out there that they were traveling in these machine spaceships coming down. It was so interesting to find that in isiZulu, but I found that some words are hard to understand because as writers we are forced to create words. Fortunately for that one, it was written in isiZulu and English, so I would also go and check the English version to find what exactly the writer means. So as writers, when we try to attempt genres such as science fiction, the problem is there with terminology. But also as a language specialist, I am aware that there are quite a number of projects out there for developing terminology. So the combination of the language fraternity and the writing fraternity can actually lead us to more genres in African languages. We can be able to write more than we can because there is that limit of terminology. It's a fact that there are words that we don't have in our language, but then as language specialists, we are creating those words so that we can be able to express ourselves in any way that we want. So there is quite a lot of growth needed out there, but it's also very, very possible. I also came across an article that I read last year, written by Dr. Mhlambi, Professor Mhlambi from Verse. She wrote about the romance genre, its absence in our language. That you won't find words such as sex in our books. You won't find that kind of information explicit in our indigenous books. Whereas if you read a fiction, by Mills and Boom, you find everything out there. So there are things that we as African people shy to navigate. There are things that we as African people need to find a way to write about such things in a way that our people won't frown upon. So we as Africans have to find ways to make our literature more appealing to our readers in a way that is also aligned with our cultural practices and our lines of our beliefs as the African people. So there is quite a lot out there. There are lots of gaps that we as writers can fill, especially if we are working together with the people in the language fraternity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Kwanele, I'm bringing you into this as well. I don't know whether you have any comments or just insights regarding this.
I think social media is probably one of the biggest things that we have, that a lot of people, especially for poetry, I'm going to speak mostly on poetry at the moment. As I mentioned earlier, Ruthie Paul, there's R.H. Sin, there is Nair Wahid. These are mostly international American people that I'm talking about because they do have the bigger platforms and they do have a bigger following, unfortunately. And tapping into that market as a South African, as African people, is also something that we need to do and look into, and how we do it, So I've noticed a big jump in poetry reading, especially because of social media. Rupi Paul posts probably a poem each day, which is also very good looking to the eye, with her words on top of that, because she illustrates most of the things. So she is setting the trend. We have to kind of follow the trend and then take that trend and make it ours. How do we build on top of a trend that is out there? How do we get South African kids reading the things that are relevant to us? I think we should be speaking a lot more to teachers, to kids maybe, and those are the social media platforms. Ask them, what do you want to read about? Because as writers, we should be filling a need of the audience. Yes, it's lovely to write something that's coming from the heart, and I love doing that. But also at the same time, what do people want to read? What is this generation wanting to read about? I'm not gonna lie, I don't really, as much as I enjoyed Shakespeare, I would have loved to have read something a lot newer. The old English isn't for me. I would have loved something that's a lot more modern, something that is easily understandable. I get there's a point of Shakespeare because it's building up all that old stuff and learning how to write. The innovators of their times. But there are young people who have voices that are kind of being silenced, that aren't being listened to or haven't been given opportunities. I think young writers and writers in South Africa and Africa in general should be speaking to schools, and we should build a relationship to get our schools into set books, you know. The one thing that I remember now is Spud. Spud was one of the biggest crazes by John van der Reyt, one of the biggest crazes that's gone through South Africa, and he's probably one of the only South African writers that I have read in English classes besides this school. You know, we've had our...
I think we lost Kwanele there for 2 seconds.
And he's been the only person that's been persistent through that.
Thank you so much, Kwanele. I suppose the discussion, you know, there's the local and there's the international. It sounds as if you need to tap into both the fields equally, that internationally that you are all current and aware of the trends that are happening. And as Celimpilo says, we need also a sort of a platitude of genres in our African languages. What is that dynamic where we are in the local sector, for example? How does the socio-economical dimensions of people not affording books, people not being able to have access to books because perhaps they can't even read, even in their own African languages? What are the complexities that you guys face in the local space in South Africa? And then, of course, how is it that you're still keeping up within the global sector? As Kwanele says, that there are these trends that are happening that we possibly need to keep up with. But at the same time, we're trying to navigate an unequal society when it comes to access to books. And I'm not talking about access only to the PDF or the book itself, but access to it in literacy, the lack of reading, etc. I don't know, Themba, since you've seen this landscape for many years and also still competing within an international level, what are these dynamics? How can writers navigate both that international space and still pioneer, as well as navigate a local, the local issues and the local promises and blessings that we have as well?
Yeah, for me, I think the biggest investment we can make as a country is to promote reading to the young people. But we as writers too have a role to play to make sure that we are making available a good quality literature work in all the genres so that we can excite the young readers. And when you capture them young and they love reading, and they can even pick a genre they fall in love with that they love, you are ensuring that in the future you've got adult readers. Because some people are really struggling. It's because a lot of us were reading by force at school because it's a set work. There are a lot of other things that have affected our reading culture. But just to say that, we also used to read, because I remember when I was young, you will see people also reading books at those particular day. I don't know where we've lost it. But what is very important is that we need to make sure that we invest a lot in trying to make sure that the young people are reading, make it available. And it also goes to the retail shops that are selling books. And I'll challenge you just to go to this major bookshop that we've got and ask for a section for children's book. And the book that you'll see there are coming from Europe. And you ask for the local South African languages, you don't find them. And there are always a reason to say maybe people are not buying them. But how can you buy something when it's not even there? I mean, therefore, there is a need to push for that. And that will make sure that we are really investing in a very good future for the reading fraternity, because we'll be cultivating the readers of tomorrow. But we also have to make sure that there are a lot of reading materials happening. I think right now there is a lot of reading material that I've come across from my own research, where you look at people even writing stories and putting them into their Facebook. Usually they will break it into chapters or chunks that you can read even in your cell phone. There are a number of people who are doing so, and they do have a following. And that means it's also making it possible for people to be able to read. I think the reading things is also just to make sure that we also found in a space where the young people are, but most of all is to excite them by writing something that they can identify with, that they will be attracted to. As you can see them, they're playing their PlayStations. The PlayStation, that genre, this is there, is something else. This is war, they're fighting aliens there, and so on. They're excited about it and they spend time. But when it's come to our books, they don't find the same excitement. And that means us as writers too, we need to be always constantly trying to find out what excites our potential readers. It means whenever you want to write, think of a market research. You need to writing for a certain people in mind. Of course, we'll attract other new people who may not necessarily like that part of genre, but at first, it's also make a good sense for one to write in a focused way with a market in mind, because it usually focuses you and to write in a way that your audience will also be able to understand what is going on there and be excited about.
Thank you. I mean, Celimpilo, it sounds like the publishing industry it's quite competitive. You're competing internationally as well as local artists. When you went by yourself, if I'm correct, with self-publishing, how are you navigating that, and how are you navigating with traditional publishers out there, and as Themba says, with retail sellers who are selling, I suppose, the big names, the international big names versus the new upcoming names? You went by yourself. How is this? How are you grappling with it?
Okay. Like Themba said, in the shops, in the bookshops, you find mostly it's the books that are out there are the ones from abroad. You find most international books there, and if you do find African books, you will find them, but there will be a few from our country. And if you do find those from our country, then most of them will be written by the white people, if I may put it that way. Not that I'm being racist or anything, but most. And I heard someone saying that the reason why in the publishing, in the shops rather, you find most English books written by white people being sold there mostly is because they don't believe in Black writers. So if you're a Black person writing in English, there's a challenge for you already that it won't be easy to access the bookshops with your English written books because your English won't be as good as a first language speaker, obviously, because it's not your mother tongue. So if you're a Black person writing in English, there's a challenge already there for you that how will you access the bookshops, you know? But there are excellent writers like Pumelela that we all look up to. You know, there are a lot of Black writers, and with their books there, it does inspire us as well. Would see one day my book as well might be there. So there are distributors. So with my books, I managed to get the Past the Criminal Mind to exclusive books as well as Take a Lot. But with that happen because of the assistance of my publishers, they were able to get my books into those shops. But then I tried to get the books as well to other bookshops. And then I was told that, yeah, we are aware that your book is out there, but at the moment we are not interested because we've decided not to put self-published books. They are just crowding our space, you know? So as self-publishers, there is a challenge that they don't really trust you that much because you are self-published. So there is a challenge of a competition between traditional published books and self-publishing books. But it's important, like Uputi said earlier, Kwanele, if I'm not mistaken, said earlier that when you write your book, you have an idea of what you want in your book. You have an idea of what the cover you want it to be like. You know exactly what you want. And then when you go to a traditional, then you need to be ready to be told that we need to change this and this, we want this and this because this is what is needed out there. So as self-publishers, we need to be aware of our readers. So the traditional, when they tell you to change this and that, there is a reason for that. So as self-publishers, like Themba said, we need to do our research and find out what it is that people want to read. And then we should shape our books in that way so they can be acceptable in the bookshops. So we as self-publishers have to do most of our work to make our books qualify to be there in the bookshops.
Sure. I don't know if Kwanele, if you can echo what Celimpilo is saying here within your own experience.
Yeah, I think the traditional versus self-publishing one is a big one, because people believe that traditional publishers know exactly what they're doing and they've been in the space for many, many years, so they know the ins and outs, and if you are traditionally published, then there's nothing wrong with your book, you know. Whereas where you're self-published, they question every single little thing, because how do you know this is the thing that should be done? Why did you do this? How come it's being done like that? You know, you made a mistake over here, but no, I didn't really do that mistake. This is supposed to be like this, you know? So you are fighting every single person out there. As well, the audience. The audience is like, how come you didn't get published traditionally? You know, should I believe in your writing ability because you decided to self-publish? Sometimes you have to self-publish. You know, there's so many stories out there that need to be out there, and traditional publishers don't want to take a chance on you because, first of all, we are kind of no names. No one really knows us. We can't build a reputation. It's happened to many and many a person, many a writer, and they've had to self-publish, and then people have realized that they've made a mistake. So I think people need to start taking chances on people, be it traditional publishers or just the general audience. We kind of know what we're doing. We don't bring out things for fun. You know, we've had people read our stuff to make sure that there's no grammatical errors. There's no little errors that we can like blatant errors. We've written this with passion. We'd like to think that we know what we're doing. We've done our research. So I think you should be able to pick up a self-published book and read that. And could I go back to the socioeconomic question that you asked about earlier? It is a big one. You know, to spend 150 Rand, 200 Rand, 300 Rand on a book, where I would rather spend that money on food or something like that. But I can take that back into the schools again. Government can be providing the set books. Take a chance on us each year, maybe rotate every 2 years, bring in an African writer every 2 years or something like that. They are able to get those funds and get kids interested in our books. Why aren't we set books, you know? The big private schools as well, they could take chances on us. They're taking chances on Johnson Rate. Why can't they take a chance on all three of those? Maybe we need to change the curriculum quite a bit as well. Maybe instead of reading about Shakespeare every single year, we find someone new, someone younger, someone African. You know, there are so many people out there that deserve chances or are in need of a chance just to be given to them, that they probably could be or should be big name writers by now.
Absolutely. I mean, you're mentioning something quite interesting about how government needs to also, I suppose, put a hand into it and promote Indigenous language writers and promote Black writers. It does seem it's an industry still quite divided in my own observation and in my own listening from what you are all stating. I suppose then it leads me to where are we going? And I think we've got one question, if that's correct. If you don't mind, the question I think is, what is the thoughts from the panel regarding some publishers taking such a large chunk of the book's revenue? Some authors only getting 50% of profits. Is it even justifiable? Themba, can we go to there and then if anyone else can jump in and comment?
Yeah, and it's not even 50%. Usually, because I self-published, I'm also published by other mainstream publishers too. And usually it's a standard, the royalty for a novel usually is 10%, some 12%, some 15%, but I have never had anyone beyond 20. Those are the percentage. And the publishers justify it based on the investment they're making on the book. Because from the onset, when you bring your manuscript, they have to find somebody to read it who's a reader before it's recommended. And the whole process they're paying throughout. And it's once it is done, they will be editing, proofreading, layout, and all those things. And then you need graphic design to do some covers and other things. There's a lot of money that they are spending. Then there is printing, there is distribution. And when they take the same book to the bookshop, there are some distributors also charge distribution fees. And then the retailers also have got their own retail fees that they're charging. And therefore, at the end of the day, when that book is 100 Rand, maybe the publisher, that book was maybe 50 Rand for them or 48 Rand. And from that 48 Rand, you also as a writer, you're supposed to get something there. That's why you get your template from there and so on. Therefore, they justify it mathematically based on the investment that they've put on the book. Sometimes they even take risks. Sometimes they even pay for the storage of the book somewhere else. Therefore, that one is a give and take, but it needs to be debated much better than in this forum because it's also very technical. Yeah, that's why a lot of people also do self-publishing, because with self-publishing, you also do your own investment. As a self-publisher, I've learned also not to be angry a lot with certain mainstream publishers, because I understand now the investment that you have to put. There are risks that you are putting there. But the debate about whether this 10 or 15% is justifiable, I think we need to debate it further and to look at whether it can be added. But I don't think this forum will be able to do justice to that. Yeah, but these are the issues that are there. They're called the royalties. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think we've touched on something quite emotional and also quite pertinent, because artists are starving out there. Writers need the money as well, to some degree. But as you say, Themba, it does need a bigger discussion. But can I put it over to you, Kwanele and Celimpilo? What are your thoughts regarding that question?
Okay, with me, before I published my first book, I spoke to a writer, and he advised me that he had been publishing traditionally, and his books were out there in the schools and everything went well. But he had a problem with the royalty. So he advised me against that because of the royalty, that he said, you don't get much from it. They would make millions and you will make next to nothing as compared to what they are making. So he advised me to go the self-publishing route. But also, like Themba said, there's investment there involved as well, because you have to pay for all those costs now, the layout, the editing, proofreading, printing, all of that. It takes a lot from you, and you're not even sure whether you will get sales, whether those books will already sell and whether you'll make anything from that. So you are just taking a chance to see what's going to happen. So in a way, like Themba said, it's a debate that has to be debated out there. But then in a way, I can say self-publishing helps in a way that you are able to get more than you would have as if you had gone the traditional route.
Thank you. I know for sure. I've got friends. I'm coming to you, Kwanele, who are writers, and basically they're selling their own books online. They're saying, "Guys, I've got the book. Let me know. I'll send me this cash. Let me see your receipt, and I'll send it to you." I see that has become a trend as a way so that they can find income in their own writing. Kwanele, you just published in October. What can you say?
I think I agree with both of them, especially Themba Mabaso. It's a big debate. I get it from the business sense of the traditional publishers, because at the end of the day, they also need to make money as much as that we need to make money. Maybe the contracts should not last as long as they do. Maybe after they've broken even or something, we can renegotiate our royalties, because we also have to eat at the end of the day, So for me, it's also been very hectic. Maybe we can have hybrid contracts where we can get higher percentages and we also put in a bit of our own money. I don't know. There's a lot of things. I think it is bigger than this panel at this moment in time. It's its own 2-hour conversation in itself, But I think Mabaso hit the nail on the head. It's a big one, and that's why I'll do it.
Thank you. I'm going to just quickly go to a comment said by Dladla and then move on to audio books. She says, "Thank you, Themba. Publishers need to explain to authors why they get the 10 to 15% or whatever percent. Publishers take the risk as well, as it's a high risk. But if authors don't know where the bigger chunk of the percentage goes they will always feel aggrieved. It's all about open communication between author and publisher." I mean, I think that is quite a true statement. What are your thoughts there, Themba?
Yes, thank you. I think she put it right there. That is just it. Because I also learned through when I was doing my own self-publishing. That's when I understood. It became clearer to me certain things, but it's just that publishers do not explain to people so they understand exactly what is it. Sometimes they even talk about marketing of the book, but you don't see this book market somewhere, because maybe you know of your traditional marketing where you put billboards in the newspapers. They may have another type of marketing that they call trade marketing that doesn't come to you as an ordinary audience that may be within the trade. But these are things that are happening here. But as long as they explain themselves and then you get convinced, you will understand where they're coming from and so on. And even when they're bringing in the royalty statements, it needs to be very clear to show how many books they were sold, how much it was and how much they got. Some do that, but some maybe do not do that. But it also helps to clarify the issues.
Thank you very much. I think that notion of transparency is so crucial, so that the writer has a clear understanding of where everything is going to. And I suppose your first book or your first couple of books will make a loss maybe, and it's about being consistent and going forward as one can. And Celimpilo, perhaps you can assist me with this question that's coming from Dladla, where she says, how can audio books be introduced in our African books, because this can make reading very interesting for the youth? I know for sure I was introduced to audiobooks about 3 years ago, and it just made me remember of Mabali on the radio. It just took me back to that imaginative space where I can listen and be taken into that imagination. I don't know, for me, I'm just saying audiobooks have just been the revelation that I never thought I knew. What are your thoughts around that, specifically around African languages as well being included within audiobooks?
Okay, I am yet to come across an audiobook in our language. I haven't come across one. Not that I'm saying there isn't one, I just personally haven't come across one. But I find myself quite fascinated by audiobooks. The fact that I can listen as I go to work, I can listen it, and I'll be cooking and I have my earphone in my ear, and be listening to this book. I'm loving it. But at the same time, I'm also aware that it takes away the educational parts for literature. That now, if it's a child that is more into audiobooks and reading, that child won't be able to gain the language side of the book, learning where the punctuation should be, learning the spelling, learning new words. So that is just a minor setback for audiobooks. But I would like to tap into that. I'm still trying to find out how it's done. I think we as African writers or writers of African languages have to find out how it is done and do it, because it seems to be a way forward for us, especially because people can be able to access your books anywhere, anytime, and they can, there won't be anything hindering them from listening to your book. Just like you said, it's like listening to the radio and listening to a story or three or Kozini, I enjoy that. You get to listen to someone narrating a story to you rather than you reading it. So as writers of African literature, I think it's important for us to tap into that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Kwanele, I know with poetry, I think it's Koleka Putuma who just produced an audiobook as well in her poetry, Collective Amnesia, for example. And I was seeing a couple of friends sitting together with earphones and listening to her work. And I thought, wow, this is actually quite a new trend that I would like to actually join, with your glass of wine, you're sitting there listening together. There's this kind of communal relationship that happens with audiobooks to some degree. I don't know about your experience, Kwanele.
I think I agree. I think audiobooks are probably one of the bigger things. I'm also looking into it. I think it might be easier for me because my brother's a music producer, so he knows how to work with it. So it should be a lot easier for me to access. But in the same thing, I think poetry like that, it's a lot like spoken word. I think a lot of people enjoy spoken word. So why not have it as an audio version, audio book with spoken word? People can hear the emotion, because at the same time, I love audiobooks, and at the same time, I don't disagree, but I think some people, when I want them to read something of mine, I want them to interpret it the way that they want it to. So I might emphasize on a certain word in a certain phrase when I'm reading it out, but they might emphasize it in a certain phrase in a certain way when they read it themselves. So there is a place for it. There's a beautiful place for it, and I think it's very important. It makes it a lot more accessible. But at the same time, I think people need to read so they can emphasize and find what they need to find in a book. But it's beautiful. Share a glass of wine, have listened to a bit of spoken word from, with your friends, and have that beautiful night with a bit of je ne sais quoi, and it sounds amazing. I'm excited for it. I think it's a huge place. It's a huge thing that we can do. And maybe authors as well of traditional books in terms of novels could also have not spoken word, but can use maybe read a page of their book, put it out into social media where people can see the author read like a night in. When you're having a launching a book, so you have that first chapter that is read out by the author to the audience. We have social media for that. We can, especially now times during COVID, literally sit down, 10-minute reading, and you can reach an audience of 1,000 people. And I think we should look into that a lot more. Video and audio is going to be a huge part of the world that we are in now. Look, we're having a virtual time with the writer as we speak. It's huge. So I think people as authors, we need to look into it and do more of it.
Absolutely. I think I'm so proud of Themba the writer for taking this into social media platforms and all over. We coming to an end, and I don't want to end this myself, but I'd like to know from you guys, to young aspiring writers, what short message can you give them out there, to these to the youngsters who are still writing on their notepads and they're wanting to go and publish? What brief advice do you give out there to those young writers? Celimpilo, you can start with you, and then Sosafako at the time.
Okay. So when I wrote my first book, which I don't even mention because because of the mistakes I made there, I wrote the book, then I gave it to someone to edit, but I did not give it to a professional editor. And the publishers I had used did not do much work. I guess they were just making money. I had chosen the wrong publishers. So I learned the importance of writing and rewriting, editing my own work, and then sending to professional editors, and from professional editors to professional proofreaders, and also finding professional publishers as well. So when you find mistakes in your own book, you become so embarrassed that you want to hide and just burn the book or something, because it's just so embarrassing. I don't even mention that book as one of my work because it's just so embarrassing. So it's important to have your book professionally done so you can be proud of your work. So when someone else pages through, you won't hide, and like, I hope they won't find a missing A or missing a word, something there in your book. So the importance of editing, I just want to emphasize the importance of getting your work edited, reread, and proofread as well.
Thank you so much, Celimpilo. But Themba, you have to write and rewrite and write and rewrite. I don't think young artists want to hear that, but what advice do you give?
No, say let people be creative. I think the audience out there is looking forward to anything very creative and new. And what I'll say to the young writers, because yes, be inspired, but do your research. It's very important to do your research. And also read. You cannot be a writer if you do not read. Read books. Be a friend with the library. That will make you a good writer, because you are able to read other people's work and also be conscious about them and be critical. And then when you are doing your own writing, you will also have something that will guide you much better than just shooting in the air. Therefore, you need to focus where you're shooting. Thank you.
And Kwanele, what are your words of wisdom from 2020 in October? You published your first one, hey? And congratulations, by the way, during the pandemic when you're a publisher. What is your advice out there?
To the people of my age, us young people, patience, and patience, And for people who write shorter stuff such as poetry, don't throw away anything. Doesn't matter how bad you think it is or whatever, just compile it, keep it, and then keep on writing. Write something new every day if you can, whatever, just write. You'll become better, you'll find your own voice a lot better. Because I find that in the beginning, you're trying to copy someone that might have influenced you, and you've got a voice, but it's not really yours. But once you start writing and finding who you are and what you really enjoy, then I think you become better. So just keep on writing and enjoy your writing. Write different things, different topics, novels, poetry, and that's what I think. Just find until you find your own voice.
Inkosi kakhulu. This is just for Samantha at the question and answer section. Just to brief, is asking, can you guys provide us with publishers who are ready to publish us? Themba, I'm sure you are ready to publish Samantha's book now.
No, I think a lot of publishers have a problem with a lot of unsolicited manuscripts. And there are a lot of people who are sending manuscripts. When I say do your research, even if you are right, you've got a manuscript, also do your research. Look at the publishers that are publishing books of the similar nature of that particular genre. Then they've got an editorial staff who are very specialists in that particular area, they'll help you. But before you do so, some website from other publishers tell you what they need. There is a letter that you write, you also give them a synopsis, and some publishers even ask you whether you've got a market in mind, because they want to hook into the market that you've already identified so that they can see the potential from that point. That's why there's a lot of work needs to be done. There are publishers that can publish you, but do your homework and try to find out whether they accept unsolicited or whatever policies they have. It is very helpful to be informed so that you do not waste a lot of your energy.
And on that, I want to say thank you so much to the three of you for giving us your own experiences and your insights within the publishing industry. I'm very grateful for this conversation, and I really do think that it needs further discussion, as Themba has also said, that there are more things to look into. Again, Diabulela for your presence. Thank you, Celimpilo, Dladla. Thank you, Kwanele, Sifunda, and thank you, Themba Mabaso. I wish you all the best within your endeavors. I will definitely be buying your books, and I'm even your first one, Celimpilo. I'm just kidding. But also, I want to say thank you to Themba the writer for having us and for curating this wonderful panel. And thank you to Hear My Voice. Siyabulela, guys, for your assistance with us. And on that, I'd like to say thank you. Pumelela Nqelenga, and have a lovely weekend.